Welcome back to MHW Clinical Rounds. This is a second episode of the patient with congestive heart failure whose heart's been failing despite optimal medical therapy. And the first episode, we talked about the approach we recommended, and really I wasn't too excited about the patient's first attempt. She wasn't fully compliant, and so Camille's going to update us on where we are now and how we're doing. So stay tuned to see if this patient gets her act together. Okay, we're back at MHW Clinical Rounds, and here we're dealing with this patient, this SB, and I really wasn't too confident what's her outcome, especially being only 70% compliant. So hopefully you have some news to maybe prove me wrong. So give us an update.
So there is good news. So she really took everything we said in seriousness, and she did do all plant-based, and she would bring in her nutrition labels of anything that she maybe purchased if she did purchase something. I really saw from her a desire to learn, and the more I visited with her in April and May, the more I saw her devotion to making her heart healthier. And she'd reflect on wanting to be around with her family, her grandkids and stuff. So I really felt definitely confident in her now. She came back a few times, and we had redone some blood work, and we did a repeat echocardiogram in that time. Her ejection fraction went up to 30% from 20%. And her NT-proBNP, a biomarker, a blood test, also improved. One thing that was an issue during this time was that she was hesitant and afraid to wean the diuretic, the furosemide, because initially she was on 80 milligrams once a day. Initially, we told her, when she's starting this raw detox, I had wanted her to reduce to 40 milligrams right away, and we could always take more if we needed. But she was remembering when she had fluid buildup in the lungs, and she's very fearful of that feeling again. She never really got edema in the legs, so she didn't have something visual to see and gauge, but it was more of struggling for breath, struggling to breathe. In April, when I just had a check-in on her, I really tried to make her feel more comfortable reducing the diuretic. She still didn't really do that until May 2nd. But at that time, I talked about it again. I let her know that that's something you and I really want her to do, really wean those diuretics first, because our fear is that it could over-diurese somebody and make them intravascularly volume depleted, which when I did blood work May 2nd, it reflected that her kidney function got slightly worse.
So more dehydrated.
Yeah.
Because she didn't decrease the diuretic like you instructed. Yeah, that's important. And people get attached to the medications quite a bit. And it's interesting. There's a lot you said that needs to be unpacked. I mean, you talk about reading of the labels. Of course, we put patients on a raw plant-based diet. Sometimes they get some dehydrated, packaged items, and you still have to read labels sometimes. And these are some more savory foods that we recommend. The fact you were seeing her fairly frequently is important, and it's one of the things that we do that I find to be relatively unique is that we do very frequent office visits. In fact, some patients may see multiple times within a week, 7 or 8 times within a month, largely because if they're so critical, we have to see them and lay eyes on them. In addition to the office visits, we have a digital health clinic we're calling. So I sense that all these things are going on with this patient to carry her through the process. So the lifestyle is very, very intense sometimes, and I think you did a good job with all the support. Improvement in the ejection fraction is really important. That's an important finding, and that's an amazing finding. Again, I wasn't too encouraged by her. And then you mentioned something else. Many of you heard that phrase NT-BNP as a blood peptide molecule that we measure in the blood. This brain peptide originates in the brain. It was initially discovered in the brain, but they find it's in the GI tract and the heart. And it's a molecule that we measure if the heart muscle cells are under a lot of stress and strain, if you're in fluid overload and the heart's dilated and the muscle under strain, the cells release a lot of this BNP molecule in the bloodstream. We measure it. If it's high, that implies a certain amount of strain. You want to get some of the strain off of the blood. That can be done by reducing the blood pressure, among other things. Sometimes you diurese them to release some of the strain. Now, she has congestive heart failure. Her BNP level will not go down to normal. Sometimes it goes down too low. That means she's too volume depleted. So with the weak heart, it tends to be a little bit elevated sometimes. The fact that that went down some was a good sign. Now, unfortunately, the creatinine went up, and I agree with you. Taking too much, 80 milligrams of the diuretic known as furosemide is a pretty high dose. That's another issue with patients that get used to taking their medications, and when they start to improve their lifestyle, they become nervous about coming off medications. We have people with blood pressures that drop or various other things that get too low, because once you're optimizing your nutrition, your body is physiologically improving on its own. And so your requirement for medication becomes less, and it becomes very important to wean these medications and reduce the doses and minimize them as fast as possible. In many cases, eliminate them. Here's a case where you don't reduce the dose fast enough, the creatinine goes up. So I imagine she took your advice after, the second, third visit, or?
Yeah, she did, because I kind of showed her the numbers. So her creatinine increased from 1.26 to 1.32.
And that means her flow through the kidneys are lower. So the creatinine is a molecule of protein we measure in the blood. And the better the circulation, the lower that protein number is. And so if that protein number goes up, that means the filtration of flow through the kidneys is lower. And the protein number goes down, the flow through the kidneys is higher. So the fact that it went up means that the circulation of the kidneys, it wasn't clearing that protein fast enough. That protein's not being cleared, that number goes up. She was dehydrated, the kidneys were shutting down, so reduced the diuretic.
Then the creatinine, it went back down to 1.16, which was now lower than it was even in March. Mm-hmm. So that was good. So then at that point, I said, let's reduce the furosemide again. Furosemide's the same thing as Lasix. It's just a generic version. So I said, let's reduce from 40 milligrams a day down to 20 milligrams and try that every other day. Our goal is to get you off of that and not feel so dependent on it.
So basically, where we are now is that she's on the road to recovery. We're reducing the diuretics. I have hope for this patient now.
Yeah, I definitely do.
The EF at 30%, she's still not out of the woods. I mean, still, from the standpoint of the indication for the upgrade device, you can still make an argument for it. Now, keep in mind, she's still on the other medication. Now, some people say, well, the medication's now working, it's kicking in. She'd been on these medications for a long time.
Yeah.
And the heart was getting weaker despite the medication. So the medications really had nothing to do with this change, in my opinion, so far. In fact, we're weaning one of the medications, the diuretic. In fact, leaving it on caused a problem. So this is clearly her effort in the lifestyle intervention. So let's see if we can get her all the way to where we can maybe get the diuretic off completely and keep her weight stable, under control, and see if we can get the ejection fraction up even higher. Because that would be the telltale sign of seeing the ejection fraction improve, getting up to normal.
Right. So I saw her again, and in July we did more blood work again, another echocardiogram, and now our ejection fraction was up to 50%.
Whoa.
To see how happy she was and just so much more hopeful. It's like you could see, honestly, kind of her fears go away in that moment to an extent, right? Because everyone gets scared when they're told they have heart failure and their heart's pumping weak. It's kind of like doomsday, like when's your life gonna end, right?
Yeah, that's true. How did kidney function do? That was an issue with the diuretics up and down.
Yeah, so I was really proud of her because my last recommendation was to reduce the diuretic to 20 milligrams every other day. I was kind of working with her, weaning it a little bit slow to make her comfortable to an extent. And she eventually just stopped it altogether.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so because of that, her kidney function got better again. So that creatinine we want to be lower, it had decreased even more down to 1.07.
Oh, wow.
And so her filtration rate, which how your kidneys filter your blood, retain the good things, get rid of the bad things in the urine, you want that higher. From March to now, it had increased from 45 to 55.
So the GFR went from 45 to 55.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's more than 10% increase.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about 11% increase. That's impressive. You know, that increase in GFR, there are two things going on. One, getting off the diuretics, she's not dehydrated, so her intravascular volume or circulation is better. And the overall cardiac output is probably better because that GFR indirectly measures flow to the kidney. So if your heart is weakening and your circulation is dropping, you have a situation where when circulation drops, the body preferentially shunts blood to the most important organs, the brain, the heart, etc. One organ that starts to get the least amount of flow is the kidneys. Now it's important because less flow to the kidneys is a signal to the kidneys to release certain hormones to counter a condition known as shock. Shock is like if you're bleeding out, your blood pressure's dropping because you're losing volume through blood or whatever, then the body says, okay, we need to conserve our flow and send it to the most important organs. So in this case with heart failure, it'll constrict blood vessels all over, except blood will be shunted to the brain or the heart itself. If the circulation of volume picks up and there's more flow, then that process reverses. When there's more flow to go to the brain and the heart, then there's extra flow to go to the kidneys. So then the kidneys start to filtrate better. So that's a sign of better flow throughout the body, even though we're in this part indirectly measuring it in the kidney. So that's an important thing. And then of course the ejection fraction, we talked about this before. You know, congestive heart failure is when the heart only squeezes a small percentage of blood. She started at only 20%. Now it's at 50%. So that's amazing. And you eliminate one of her medications, which was the ideal first one to eliminate. So that's a pretty impressive. So as a summary, what did we see? What are all the numbers that improve? So baseline to now.
So yeah, as a summary, you know, we just mentioned the kidney filtration rate increase from 45 to 55. The NT-proBNP, which we talked about in the past, reflective of strain or stress in the heart, had gone down from 846 to 336. Then that's a great improvement. Wow. So all of our numbers were so much better. The ejection fraction went from 20% up to 50. So now she doesn't meet that criteria to get the cardiac resynchronization therapy device. As long as she stays with her healthy lifestyle, she can definitely maintain these improvements.
So yeah, so she's avoided, this other procedure. And again, I want to emphasize it's not just this one procedure she avoided, because oftentimes when patients get into the slippery slope, had she not made those changes, not only would she have to have this procedure, but perhaps down the line you get into left ventricular assist device. That's a more invasive procedure. We put a pump on the left ventricle to help the left ventricle pump, and then you get into potentially transplant issues. So by going this route, I think she's done something that's quite amazing. And one thing you mentioned earlier, she said she wanted to spend more time with her kids and grandkids. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's really important, because it sounds like she really understood the value of quality of life over just being kept alive on medications or devices. And she made quite a few lifestyle sacrifices, some people may call them. You really make a value proposition. You see eating the foods you so-called like to eat or want to eat is something important to you. I've had patients come to me saying, well, what about weddings, or what about holidays? I'm on this restricted diet. However, oftentimes people who are eating these foods, they get to a point that they're so sick, they're in the hospital a lot, they're taking a lot of medications, They're not able to attend weddings. They're not able to attend parties, etc., because they're so sick. And so their lifestyle is more restricted, but it's not restricted on their terms. It's restricted on the terms of an illness.
Yeah.
And what she did is she took matters in her hand and she made lifestyle changes she did on her terms. Yes, I'm going to follow this 100%, reduce these medications, strengthen my heart so that I can then see my loved ones and spend time and have better quality of life. And I think that's a really important thing for people to understand and to act on, because really these lifestyle changes are not nearly as hard as they seem to be. And once you get used to living this way, exercising, eating right, it becomes the new normal. And we've seen it time and again. So congratulations to her. I was really very doubtful at the beginning, but I'm really, really excited about the accomplishments she's made so far. I look forward to the outcome. So I hope you've learned a lot. I certainly learned a lot about this person's, willpower, but not just willpower, but just the whole concept of value proposition. What do you value? What is your heart worth? What are your kidneys worth? Is it worth, these poor foods, this poor lifestyle, etc.? So what are your final thoughts?
Well, you saying that made me think of two things. One, it reminded me that she was worried about her weight loss because she did lose about 10 pounds or 5% of her body weight, but she gained a huge amount of heart function, of kidney function. And, we talked with her, a nutritionist did a good job telling her, how she can get enough calories on a plant-based type of regimen, and your body will kind of balance out at a weight that's most appropriate for you, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes all of this lifestyle change is beneficial to an extent as well, where some people get the cardiac resynchronization therapy device, and we do see that increase the ejection fractions and the setting of the left bundle branch block a lot. But how long will that benefit last if you don't change your diet? If you don't also implement that lifestyle change, even though you maybe got the special surgery, that might not have been as long-lasting treatment as the lifestyle change, because we see a lot of people get a surgery, whether that's a device or bypass or stents, and then they're coming to us because that isn't working anymore.
And the lifestyle undermines all of these therapies. So if you eat bad food, it's going to undermine the medications, the surgeries, and everything. So I think you're right. And I think she understood this and she made the commitment and dedication. So no, those are excellent points. So again, another fascinating story. I hope you learned a lot here. And of course, as usual, if you have any questions or any special comments, please leave them in the comment section. We'll do our best to respond to comments and questions as best we can. Of course, please be respectful. But until next time, take care. Thanks for watching. If you got value out of this video, please like it, subscribe, and hit the notification button to see our next show.